3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to Thrivable Future Salon in combination with Holo Holochain. My name is Mark Finnon. I'm the founder of the Thrivable Future Salon, together with Jean Russell. I'm a very happy husband. And so today is a great pleasure and big thank you to Jim over there for opening up the Mozilla location. Really cool location, and especially this technology here that we are able to webcast and record, and also bring probably some questions in if people want to ask questions. Chat on the .holochain.com, sign up there, and we have a channel there which is the Bay Area Meetup channel, and post your questions there, so that way you get actually also onto the chat, and find these links as well in Twitter as well as on Facebook under my name. So tonight we are going to talk about Holo Holochain, which is a technology, a platform which is very, very excited to me because, as someone on the chat was posting, I want to live in a world that Holo and Holochain is enabling. And Jean is going to introduce us to all of what that means. And yeah, really excited. You're gonna show a video and do an introduction and all that, but otherwise, always, if you have a question, interrupt, we can do it interactively. And I love this one, which is a little microphone that we can throw to you. Hi, Tim. So I really love that. I would love to always have that, because it's also like a talking stick, so nobody else is talking. So sign with your hand and I throw it to you. And without further ado, with a lot of applause, everybody take your phones down. Jean, please take it away.
Thanks. So let me give a little context on who I am, and then I'll run the video on Holo Holochain, and then we'll go through the 5 innovations that we've laid out in our green paper, and we'll talk. So let me start by saying, usually I'm a participatory process facilitator, and so I would much rather move the microphone out here. I would much rather us have a discussion than I would stand up here and talk. But I will do a little bit of standing up here and talking just to get us started and lay a groundwork for us to have together. So a background on me is in 2007, I started working on a project called Thrivability. And then in 2013, I released this book. And what I was wondering is, what is the world that we all want to move towards? I looked out in the world and saw all this negative stuff on things we don't want, and said, where are the things that we do want? What is the direction we want to move in? And wrote this book to describe that. And then a couple years later, I built off a piece of that, thinking about what organizations look like in the emerging world. And so that builds off of a section in the Thrivability book, and it's Cultivating Flows, How Ideas Become Thriving Organizations. So that's how I came to this project, was from this perspective of thrivability and how do we build organizations in emergent ways to grow the world that we want. So let me cover some of this stuff because it'll relate to the Holo and Holochain. So what is thrivability? Thrivability is to develop vigorously, to prosper, to flourish. Unfolding pattern of life giving rise to more life. It's anti-fragile, and this is one of the key ways it's distinguished from sustainability. So when the system is perturbed, we want it to get stronger. It's generative, it strives for greatness, it adds more value than it consumes, and it feeds and extends carrying capacity. And so when I came to Holochain, I am bringing those values and aspirations with me to this project. Let's switch to the video. We decided on this one, right?
So there's a lot of excitement about blockchain right now. And what's great about blockchain is that it has separated data integrity from data security, meaning you don't have to keep data locked up behind a wall. You can actually spread it among many people and they can't tamper with it. And you can operate different types of agreements, systems, smart contracts, applications in that space and make sure that everybody's following the rules. A lot of people have started to see how this might be able to shift some of the dynamics, in particular power dynamics in our systems, where, for example, for a currency, you could technically have currencies that we all could participate in and issue rather than that being something central to bankers or governments. And also for software, things like Facebook or Twitter, we actually could just run these things peer-to-peer and not have a company in the middle spying on us, choosing for us, deciding what we see, what we don't. Blockchain is a hash chain of blocks of transactions, and all of the nodes that are participating in it have to synchronize one chain. They have to end up with one global ledger, which means essentially everybody has to do all of the work. So there's a fundamental scalability problem. It doesn't actually get more efficient as you add more nodes. It gets less efficient. Holochain is probably better thought of as like Git, which is a version management tool that organizes your things into a hash, but every developer is running their own copy of the repository. In Holochain, every node has its own chain, its own source chain, and all of the changes that it contributes to the system are signed to its chain and then shared to a sort of distributed GitHub, if you will. But it's a DHT, which is the technology that BitTorrent uses, for example. And so this isn't a new technology. None of the parts of this is new. It's the combination that is. And in part, what makes the DHT so different is that it's a validating DHT. It's sharded as well, which we've been sharding DHTs for a while. People have been trying to shard blockchains and haven't really figured out a good way to do that yet, but there's a lot of people very hopeful about that direction. So you can shard it, break it into pieces, and then the nodes that end up with the data, having to store this piece of data, actually validate that data. They request, they validate it against the source chains who published it. So they make sure it was signed to that person's chain and that it followed the rules in producing it. So for example, if it's a currency, that you had the credits you were spending. When people know blockchain, if they really understand the technology, they sometimes have a hard time kind of inverting the thinking because you're doing the signed chain part at the edges instead of at the center. And the center is an eventually consistent monotonic distributed hash table.
The structure is different, so it's not about having a distributed ledger that everybody is connecting to. It's about having individual source chains that are validated against each other and checked against their neighbors. So there's a sufficiency rather than everybody having to get on. And that's what makes it scalable, because as it gets bigger, it only gets more and more resilient and more efficient. Okay, so I came on with this. What are the tools that enable a more thrivable world?
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Great. Okay, we just started the recording, so I'm going to do a brief introduction to the map, which is located at map.holohackers.org.
That's Anders.
So part of what Holochain is doing is...
I was like, where is that coming from? Oh, it's Anders doing a different video. Just played on. All right, where are we? That was hilarious. All right. So I was asking, what are the tools that enable a more thrivable world? And Arthur and I have been playing together probably since 2004 or 5. So I'd been learning about his currency work. He's influenced some of the stuff I'd done on thrivability. And so I'm asking this question. I'd worked with Identity Woman on some similar kind of projects. And so when this started up, I was really excited. I was asking questions like, what is the infrastructure that's respecting privacy, and does transparency, and also transparency to foster trust? You can read some of these concerns that I have that were often like people like to say one piece of this sentence and then they don't consider the second part of that sentence. And so for me, most of these things need to be considered in a balance with each other. Do you want me to let you read them? It's a lot of text on one slide. You're going to just take a picture. Very good. So I was really excited about Holochain because I could see how it could answer some of these questions for me. It uses living ecology principles. Holo is good at tracking tiny bits. So part of the innovation around Holo is microtransactions, which we use double entry accounting for. It's agent-centric as opposed to data-centric. So if you're looking at like data privacy in Europe, an agent-centric system makes it really easy to do permissioning on your data because all your data is already yours, and so you can control that. Identity is both something I can control and something I'm situated in. So identity is one of my personal passions, and I don't think it's so simple as most people make it out to be. I'm not just Gene Russell. I am Gene Russell in context. I am Gene Russell in relationship to Mark Finnern. I am Gene Russell in relationship to Holo and Holochain, et cetera. So we wrote this green paper when we were working on developing our ICO. And as I was working through the paper, I was like, there's 5 core innovations that are happening with this project. First is the scalable distributed P2P applications, Holochain. Next, we have P2P apps for mainstream web users. So Holo enables this bridge. We have double entry crypto accounting system for rewarding hosts, which allows these microtransactions to happen. And we're leveraging excess capacity using the sharing economy principles, and that has to do with our crowdfunding campaign, and then we bonded that with our ICO. So let me go through those in more detail. So scalable distributed P2P applications. Some people talk about the decentralized web. We're interested in a distributed web. And one of the key differences there for me is it's not just about removing a centralized node, it's about actually moving it out to the edges and among the edges. We have hosting P2P apps for mainstream web users. So there's been a lot of excitement about the decentralized web, but very little activity in how do we move mainstream users over into the decentralized web. There's this wall, and you have to jump over the wall in order to get on. And so what Holo allows is for mainstream web users to go to a regular URL and end up getting transported from there to the distributed world of Holochain. In Holochain, you're carrying everybody's data together. Like I'm carrying a little bit of your load, you're carrying a little bit of mine. And because these people coming in from the regular web aren't carrying that data, we're going to pay people to be hosting that information for them. And so that's where our ICO comes in, is HoloFuel paying people to be the hosts for visitors from the regular web. Okay, so how are we accounting for that? We were like, how do we come up with a currency here that's going to work to do tiny, tiny transactions that represent the actual scale of this hosting? And then how do we account for it in a way that's not as heavy as the transaction itself? it's got to be super, super, super lightweight. And so we went to double entry bookkeeping, which is super old and very simple. It's just like one set of books goes up and the other set of books goes down, and that's all there is to the transaction, is just keeping track of who's going up and who's going down. And then we just moved that into the crypto space. Excess capacity using a sharing economy principles. So this is about, if you could buy a Holoport from us, or you could repurpose some device that you already have and download Holo, and then you become a host. And so this is like the Airbnb of web hosting, right? You're just sharing a little excess capacity, and then you're making some amount of money off of whatever you're allowing people to participate on. And volumes of that will depend on the applications that people create for us and with us. And then I happen to be the ICO project lead, so this is where some of my excitement comes in, and those of you who are coders probably have excitement in other places. But I'm really interested in how we bonded our ICO to the crowdfunding campaign. So we said, if we're going to build this economy, we need an infrastructure that we can be responsible to. So we did a crowdfunding campaign that is the Holoports, so the devices that you can use for hosting, that we've standardized and optimized for our system, and then developer events, so developers can get engaged. And we said that's the infrastructure layer for our ecosystem, and we want our ICO to be responsible for that. So there's only as much supply in the system as is demonstrated by our crowdfunding campaign. So we sold $600,000 and exceeded our target within the first 3 days on our crowdfunding campaign, and that's represented in the supply that we have for our ICO. So let's come together to make this dent in the world, and I want to talk a little bit about the dent that I want to make, and then we can open it up to questions and discussions. So as I said when I began, I'm interested in this more thrivable world, and I want to create applications on top of this that will make that thrivable world more possible. So applications that honor my lived experience as it is. You know, as a woman walking around in the world, I would like to have more control over the amount of location information that others have about me, for example. I want markets that help companies address risk by funding nonprofits to address those concerns. I've been working in the social change space for a while, and I would love to see things like companies in New Orleans able to pool their resources so that they can pay for wetland management upstream. And I think that this is one of the applications that could be built on top of Holochain that would allow for that pooling of resources to take care of actually addressing the challenge rather than just insuring against it. Applications and even currencies that help us make visible the value flowing in our communities, giving dignity to all contributions and contributors. And so to that one, I want to talk briefly about a paper that my friend Cameron Burgess wrote called From Billions to Trillions. And he's using Holochain as the base technology here. And what he's interested in doing is getting people like from, for example, the Gates Foundation, which he was working with, as well as everyday people like you and me, to all combine efforts to address challenging issues. And so in this paper, he lays out, like, if we want to address world water issues, no one foundation is big enough to be able to manage the load of addressing that topic. And so how do we create a marketplace by which challenges can be put up and people can address those challenges? And how can the data be gathered and then tied to individual people who have made their contributions and then feed together into acknowledgements and rewards for having contributed to addressing that challenge? And I think that multiple ways in which the way Holochain works really lend themselves towards this, both because of the agent-centric nature of the source chains, as well as the peer-to-peer structure, allowing us to have lots of people all over contributing. So that's one of the ways that I see. And I know that if you're used to the blockchain space, that might sound like a really big application to be building, but it's the vision that brings me to the table. Right now, we currently do have applications running on top of Holochain. It is in alpha, but we have a Twitter-like application called Clutter. We have something that's more of a group chat called Holochats. We've got coin toss. We've been having hackathons in four continents, about 15 of them, I think, where people are building applications. At one of our hackathons in Australia, a woman came in, didn't even code, and by the end of the weekend, she had a rough draft of working code that demonstrated her idea, and she's now taking that out to build something on it. So this is rapid application development, and it's also similar to Holochain being kind of a twist on how you think about these things. The application development is also a little bit of a twist because you're designing for agent-centric. And so a lot of these things can be developed as modules, kind of like plugins that kind of get added together. So your identity piece is getting added into your community, your conversation, etc. So that concludes the presentation portion. If we can now have conversation, questions, there's a microphone that I can throw at you.
Yes, throw the microphone at me.
Yay.
You.
Thanks for starting.
Hello.
It just already
yes,
works.
it works. Okay. So how many people would you say are good enough at Holochain to really build something functional?
That's hard to say. I mean, there's such a range of people's ability. So there's probably only 5 people that are really, really building. But it's
That's cool. I mean, like, I'm very aligned with your vision. I am a 4th generation commodities trader. And so because my family has already been doing this work since my grandmother's father had a coconut oil brokerage in Sumatra. So my mother went through the genocide of '65 in Indonesia alone with her little sister when she was 10 years old. And so instead of joining my family to just make more money, which is not solving our problems, I decided to kind of address the real problems and do a financial experiment where I tried to use the normal system to repair that colonial gap, right? And what I found is that by the rules of finance that are governed by the SEC, you cannot solve, that's illegal, actually. So I'm glad I'm a privately held company. And yeah, I actually have joined together with a bunch of other people in the specialty coffee industry, because that's where my business is right now, to create an actual supply chain company that is going to run on Holochain. And we've decided that, yay! But I probably need to talk to you later. And yeah, I would like to just bring into the space that, you know, there are NGOs working on chronic starvation in the coffee lands. And I recently read an entire report about NGO activity on these issues of child labor and environmental sustainability and all this stuff. And not one time did anyone suggest that maybe we should just pay these people more. What if they really should be earning more? And actually, as it turns out, the ICE, the International Coffee Exchange Index, is based on warehouses of coffee all over the world, where there's coffee that's over 10 years old that no one will ever drink. So they are inflating supply, they are artificially depressing the price, and they know it. Moreover, I've spoken to them in like large groups, and they just acknowledge it, they don't even care. And you know, we are so accustomed to the old narrative of locating morality in the global north. Well, like if they didn't abuse those children, you know, but it's actually because, you know, there are structures in place in the global north that are artificially holding these people down. That they, you know, when they ask for human rights, when they ask for things, you know, we find a way to just let them know that request is not welcome. And so there's a limitation to how far we can go with nonprofit activity, and I'm taking it into the actual economic sphere, and I think it's going to be really fun. Anyone?
So I want to add a little bit to that the project that kicked off our funding, we got funding from 3 different individuals in order to even get to the ICO stage. And one of the groups that funded us is called Village Lab. And what they do is they work with investors, philanthropists, and entrepreneurs in an intentional community in order to share in a way where they're able to see each other, not as pulled apart from each other, but trying to break open those firewalls that have been put between the funding and the activity.
Is that Josh Passmore? And
not that I know of.
I've been talking to some of those groups that are doing the intentional communities, and from an Indigenous perspective, to be honest, we already are at like a advanced level of community organization, and so that's not really our main agenda. We're taking people who are already there and moving the ball forward from that point. But I do deeply respect and value that work, so thank you.
Other questions? Over here? Throw it. Woo. All right.
That was it working. So my knowledge of blockchain is basically like a few months old, so I got into this with kind of colleagues and stuff. So one thing, for example, about these applications being decentralized, my colleague, for example, showed me a website called Steemit, for example. It's very decentralized. So one thing I noticed that if it's not like currency or something, it's like application website. If it is not centralized, the quality wasn't that good, so there wasn't that much control on it. Really, to have a really high quality product, you need really really control on it. So I feel that you have sort of control on it here. So how do you address this problem? So basically,
The quality control?
yeah, if you have like application, you have website, so if it's decentralized, so there should be a center or something on it, right? Kind of.
There shouldn't be a center.
So how do you kind of assure that it has the same quality, for example, as YouTube?
Right.
As, for example,
I'm not going to assure that it's got the same quality as YouTube. What I'm going to do is trust the ecosystem to evolve itself. And because it's so modular, it's very easy for people to build and adapt things to it. And so it's not just like you have one application. It's like you can have as many versions as people want to modify. And if people like those versions, they will use those versions. And so the community will decide if that's good enough quality, and if people don't like that application, they will use the version that they do like. And so it's very organically emerging quality control that the community is deciding what is the best
Is
thing.
there any control, for example, on something like fake news or something that's happening a lot in social media? So
Right.
it can be very easy to kind of infect
Right.
it.
So I'm just in the middle of launching a 5 blog post series on how Holochain can save democracy. And I'm sure lots of people will come back with little nuggets to wrestle over. But one of the things that's happening is that the advertising system is incentivizing the fake stories. And so, for example, Facebook is going, oh, you're upset. That means you're going to keep looking at your feed. So I want to encourage you to keep being upset. And then the news stories that are getting generated, they're writing them to get you to do emotional trigger stuff. And so that's perpetuating a bunch of the fake news. And because it's decentralized and we're all sharing and holding it, we're not paying some big corporation to pay for servers that they then have to find a way to fund. That means that we get to make a bunch more choices about that instead of having it dictated by the centralized organization that's trying to make a profit off of it. And so my hope there, and the community is going to figure that out, right? Like, it's not like we're going to stop being emotionally wired for these things. We're not. But hopefully the community, when they have that in their control, is not going to make the same choices of let's do the emotional triggers and write fake stories so we can get excited about them. So it's a lot about trusting the community, whether we'll be smart enough to do that. Any other questions? Come on. Next.
I don't think I can.
I'm trying to figure out how to frame my question, actually. I probably know the least amount about all this stuff, blockchain, holochain, whatever it is, than anybody else here. So I'm not quite sure how to frame my question.
We're all beginners here.
Fair enough. Fair enough. You just went into alpha, I know. So I have a number of clients, all of whom are talking about blockchain. And I don't know how long blockchain has been active in the space. If it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, I have no clue. But you're in alpha, so I'm guessing it's less than 20 years. What I'm curious about is, where is Holochain in relation to the journey that blockchain has taken? And blockchain is still, if we just use the financial transaction as a use case, it's still dwarfed by traditional transactions, obviously. Yeah. So it's been running for however long it's been running, and it's
about 10 years.
About 10 years. So it's about this much of transactions. Where is Holochain in that? And then kind of a part B of that question is, I don't really understand how Holochain and blockchain are they mutually exclusive? Like in the United States, I use dollars. If I'm in England, I use sterling. Or is it like I can use a MasterCard, or I can use a Visa, or I can use American Express? There's nothing preventing me from holding it all.
Right. I have great answers for you.
All right.
So blockchain really serves this desire for decentralized internet, right? And there was a real craving for that, and Bitcoin was the first app that would run on top of it. And so this idea of tokenization was very exciting, and that we could send money to our families without having to run through Western Union sounds like a really great idea. So a lot of people got excited about what that possibility looks like. But then when they started to build on top of it, they went, oh, doesn't scale very well, right? It's really good for anonymous transactions between some small set of people that are sharing in a global ledger, and everybody has to touch the ledger. And right, there's a subset of activity in the world that it's really perfect for. But we got excited about a larger vision of what it could do if it wasn't as limited as it is. And so Holochain serves that vision of what a decentralized world can do for us, but it makes it efficient and easy to do scalable applications, in part because it's not about anonymity and it's not based in tokenization. So blockchain doesn't function without Bitcoin. Holochain doesn't have a native currency. Holo is an application on top of Holochain, and it has a currency for it. But we could keep building lots of currencies on top of Holochain, and we can have applications that have no currencies on top of Holochain. And so it's opening up a much broader world.
Is that true that blockchain doesn't exist without Bitcoin? Because I thought that blockchain is also in use cases of smart contracts and what have you.
Now, Ethereum.
Oh, sorry. Bitcoin. Sorry.
And so Ethereum adds smart contracts to that equation. But they're very rigorous, like it's either on or off. You've got to follow those things to the T. And what we're hoping to do with our governance, because we're based on a very living systems model, is there are humans in the equation. And so, okay, so your client didn't pay you in time. Do you just not want that payment at all? Or are you willing to let it slide for 5 days, right? That kind of thing can happen in a Holochain world, but not so much in Ethereum world.
Okay.
The thing about smart contracts? Which thing?
You say that these things can happen only in can happen in Holochain, but cannot happen in Ethereum. What do you mean by that?
So Ethereum smart contract is very rigorous, like it's an either it's done or it's a not done thing. And people are doing crazy things, like we can get married on Ethereum. We can have the agreements for our relationship on Ethereum. But there's not a lot of fluidity for the messiness of being a human. So was I 5 minutes late? Are you gonna it didn't hit the line? And so can I be forgiving about that? And
how do you guys do it?
Because some things are hard-coded and some things aren't, and that allows for some negotiation.
And you can build it into your program, that you code it, that you say, oh, this is hard contract, and only if both sign and we agree on everything. But you can develop an application on Holochain that says, if there is no agreement, for example, a URL, as it is distributed, you can use a Mark Finnan, and there's another Mark Finnan somewhere else who is also using that URL. And then in a blockchain world, there is then a more or less, hey, you were first, and boom, 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 I get it, and the other is doesn't get it. But there are other ways to solve that problem. That you say, oh, both are notified, and then they agree about it, or you do you can bid for that name and so on. So there are many more possibilities that Holochain is enabling. That is not that one true
one single truth.
One single truth, which blockchain more or less is doing. Every 10 minutes they are agreeing on this is the truth all over, and everybody else's truth is discarded.
Yeah,
and that's huge difference.
And in the case of Mark Finnan, right, like we're planning on having multiple devices that people are using. You're using your phone, you're using your computer. And so, of course, there are going to be multiple Mark Finnans, and we would want those to be related if they're related. So if it's the same Mark Finnan, we want to be able to have those things get associated with each other so that reputation in one space gets used in another. So that's part of the motivation for why we'd be interested in having that kind of crossover.
Who else wants to have the question queue?
So I can ask another question.
Yeah.
So is it more close to Git? For example, you talked that people have this freedom that change it, so everyone can kind of push it to the Git, for example. So people see the last version, or everyone can choose kind of each version kind of through the kind of blockchain?
I know that they're thinking about it looking like that, and but I'm not sure if it's an exclusion. Like there's usually a merge request, and so we're going to choose to merge this, and now it's this version. I think there's going to be some of that, but there's also going to be, well, I just want a fork, and so you can look at the different forks of it and choose which one to go with. But I'm not a coder, so I haven't seen how that's working. I just know that's the intention that they're looking at. I would love to know more from each of you on why you came here. What excited you or interested you about this topic? What piqued your interest? It can bounce.
Kind of related to that is the question I was just about to ask, which blockchain is really centered around a lot of encryption, and there's strong value for that for certain types of data. For other ones, all you really want is integrity. So do you have the concept of a SHA-256 rather than encrypting? Because if you really want to use this for global sharing, you may not need the encryption, right? You need the integrity.
Right, so on our system, it's about how many neighbors do you check? Neighbors being, okay, well, this is something we need super high security, so I want you to check this information against 1,000 others to see if everybody agrees and that's what it is. Well, this information is just that my favorite color is blue. I don't really need that to be verified that much. It's just a preference that I have. And so that kind of stuff, you could say, well, 5 other people verify that I've noticed that her favorite color is blue. And so the app, the person who's designing the app has a lot of flexibility on what standard they set for how much that's being reinforced by the neighbors.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, because part of the scale problem is not only the number of the nodes, it's the amount of work, the proof of stake,
right.
The proof of work, things like that. And so anything you can do to diminish that gives you more efficiency.
Yes.
And so you're looking at creative ways to do that through weighting and being able to set your own metrics.
That's right.
Wonderful.
But because it is using hash tables as a technology, and only checking in with neighboring nodes, and the more nodes are on the network, the easier it is. We did a test. Holochain did a test, and it was 10,000 times faster than Ethereum. Ethereum. Thank you, Ethereum. And so I think that is really a great proof, more or less, that there is not that bottleneck.
Yeah. The question is, though, when you've got, so one of the things is, right, blockchain, a while ago, somebody was saying you could do 1,000 transactions in an hour.
Right.
And Ethereum, you could get down to 3-second transactions. Well, we're used to nanosecond transactions.
Yes.
So, you still need to do something to figure out more efficiency to the scale that we're used to, especially machine-to-machine communication, like IoT.
Yeah. We are looking at how do we compete with AWS, and in terms of transactions, we're like the Visa network. How fast are they doing? So those are the benchmarks we're shooting for, because we won't be really competitive in the world unless we get close to that, right?
Right.
Well, I have to say that, I'm very encouraged by the fact that you're leading this ICO, because from what I can see, Holochain, my dad is a programmer, and, I've been around it my whole life, but I haven't really gotten deep into it. And, the Holochain is different because it imitates biological functions, which is, Pachamama, Gaia, whatever you want to call it, this planet, it created us. Like, we're literally made of it, and everything that we do and use is literally made of it. So when you're talking about, sending people to other planets and stuff like that, you're like, hey, you're taking all these raw materials from this planet, in order to mine them and extract them, you're causing immense damage to this planet. And maybe we should just make it good here first. Would that be a thing? And so yeah, I'm like, well, when people say that they're going to go to live on Mars, I'm like, are you going to send your body back when you die? Because we want to compost it. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Team Gaia, that's definitely my interest in Holochain.
Are we going around the room?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
What brought you here?
So I'm Jim Cook. I'm the CFO of Mozilla. So obviously I have an interest in all the double entry accounting stuff. No,
Yay.
yeah. But seriously, so I know Matthew. Matthew got me into this, and I volunteered to help do these meetups at various times. But what I think Mozilla is most interested in is the user agency that Holochain can provide, and this concept of potentially creating a different browser, if you really want to go beyond and really get out there, of distributed. When you talk about distributing the web in a better way, you kind of have Mozilla at that sentence.
Yep.
Thank you for doing IPFS and other interesting extensions.
Lots of things.
Yeah.
That's encrypted. Lots of things.
Well, my interest, as I said before, was that I have clients ask me about blockchain, and I literally know nothing about it. So
And
when I started
what is
looking
your
into,
business?
Systems consulting of all the damnedest things.
Okay.
So I work for Cognizant, and so I have a financial services client, a number of tech clients, and the financial services ones are several steps ahead of the non-financial services clients, but they're all asking, how does this relate to us? And I just haven't spent any time in that. So when I started looking into meetups to start dipping my toe in the water, this popped up and it was local. So here I am.
Thank you.
I have a question in regards to financial services. So in Europe, the banks have been more or less forced to open up APIs to do interchange. Do you know anything about that?
I don't specifically.
Okay.
My getting involved in the financial services space is measured in weeks.
Oh, I see.
So I'm drinking from a fire hose in that particular area.
So I think that this is a really, really interesting space, or what is happening is more or less the European Union has said, hey, all banks need to open up and have an API to do interchange. And that was supposed to happen by March this year, I think.
It's May 15th.
May 15th. Thank you. So you know more about it. And of course, there is enormous opportunity to do this connection of the different banks and do that securely and cheaply and traceably. And so blockchain, and I think a great opportunity for Holochain, because Holochain is doing double entry bookkeeping. Therefore, the banks have a big fear of getting dirty money. They don't want that because they're afraid to get shut down. And with Holochain technology, you can reject certain transactions, which is with the blockchain not possible.
Well, so with something like Ethereum, you have to say, like for our ICO, we've whitelisted people. So if you wanted to participate, we had to already write your address to say we're willing to accept the money. But the way that Holochain works is it's both sides have to agree to the transaction. And so I can't send you dirty money without you saying I agree to receive it. And I don't have to already have your list. I can just, are you okay with that? Yeah, I'm okay with that. Okay, now we can do a transaction.
Would I know whether it was dirty money you're trying to send me or not?
Well, they're very picky about any money coming out of crypto into actual banks. So they have to do KYC and say, I know who you are. They can't do it multiple steps behind, like where did you get it from?
Yeah.
But they're very concerned about that because if they get caught touching it, then they're in trouble.
Yeah.
So.
What about you?
Hi, my name is Artie Foruhar, and I'm looking at it. I'd love to ask a question and also say my interest. Can someone can multiple technologies coexist? So, for example, you can have blockchain and Holo for, let's say, a financial institution. So, for example, the KYC whitelisting customers, very important. Can protocols coexist in your mind?
Yeah. And I think they should. So, for example, I think blockchain might be really good for very large transactions in which it's like you really want it to be hyper secure and you're only working within like the SWIFT network or whatever, right?
Yes.
Right? Within that group. And so you want hyper security there. Great, use blockchain. It's a limited number of people. It's a hyper secure environment. But then you're working with your customers, the people coming in and doing small transactions. That's going to be a better realm for Holochain. So I totally think that they could both be working. They just have a different. Holochain is much more for everyday use, where blockchain, to me, has a very specific high security use. As you were saying, right, the cost of doing it is high, and so it should be used appropriately when you need that level of security.
You may have an aggregated ledger or a meta system.
Yep. Yep.
Great. So as a sales professional, if I think of enterprise customers, commercial, mid-sized, there's different tiers that you can use the technologies if I'm getting that. Great. Thank you. My interest is I am in the professional services space with software developers and project managers. I'm looking to, on the infrastructure side, DevOps, and just looking to get my hand around or just get my arms around having the talent piece for the technology is a big part of just what we're looking at, and congratulations on just the ICO market is so interesting. I wish I had more contacts abroad to just with U.S. regulations. And more business. Business is my focus. Thank you.
Excellent.
So I'm a software engineer. I'm at LinkedIn right now. One of the things I've been thinking about looking forward is Alexa and the other assistants, and they're starting to have APIs for adding skills to them, and either they're gonna repeat the sins all over again on a new platform, or they're gonna be something more open is gonna evolve for people to use instead. And so one of the things I'm kind of looking at right now is how close Holo is to fitting in there, or how much of a gap needs to be closed.
Yeah, I did a conversation with Michael Gusick, who's a AI guy. I was really interested in doing personal AI. Like, it becomes a completely different beast if it's an artificial intelligence that's just there to serve me and is not sending data back without my permission. Mm-hmm. And so I was envisioning like health applications where it's like, I want to be able to manage my health data. I want to be able to give my doctor some permission to access some things. But my doctor is also like, have you been exercising? Well, here's my Fitbit. I can add that data in, or my AI is going, well, here's the relevant bits. Do you give permission to share that information with your doctor, and is able to do that intelligently for me? Awesome. Mm-hmm. But is it sharing it with the government? No. Is it selling that information to, some drug company for me? No, not comfortable with that. So I'm really interested in the idea of personal AI. I don't know how far we are from being able to do that kind of stuff. It depends on what developers we get interested, and how we're able to start interoperating there with others. So cool.
I mean, I'm more familiar with other blockchains, and so when I came here, I was kind of wondering what is your angle and how you work. You guys get a little bit high level, it's fine. And also, so I'm interested on the technology side, and on the other side, I found interesting that you guys take this angle from a marketing point of view of going after social good. On that, I'm trying also to understand why the technology is better than other one to accomplish those kind of goals.
So why is our group particularly interested in social good stuff?
Why the technology of Holochain is better of other chain, for example.
Right.
And so that's on the marketing side. On the other side, there are two different things, right? So right. The other side is like, you don't have a blockchain. You are distributed Hashtable. You mentioned that you don't have to verify. Not everybody has to agree, but try to understand what the implications are for consensus and all this kind of stuff.
Did you go enough already? Do you want to share some more?
No.
Okay, let me address a couple of these things. First, Arthur and Eric kind of went into the future about 50 years. Eric lives in an intentional community, a Quaker community in New York. And Arthur's been traveling around eco-villages in Europe and is very concerned, like they're both concerned about the environment, they're both concerned about social issues, but they're not like bleeding heart activists that are out like at the latest convention or something, the latest march. They're interested in like, how do we design technologies that support the things that we want to do? How do we make healthier communities? What are the ways that we can honor each other's contributions? How do we give dignity to people? And so they went out, 50 years into the future and went, what does this really look like? And then they came back and said, how do we build a bridge from today and what's going on today to that world that we're looking at, where we have thriving communities in the future? And there's Travis. And so that's a piece of like the root of why they're coming at it from a bit of a social good angle, is because they have a social agenda on what they want the world to look like. That's about communities caring for each other. Arthur has this idea of like, if we had a currency that would allow little sparkles of light to represent all the little interactions that people have and their health together, then, we get this map of all these beautiful interactions that people have, and which communities would end up really lighting up the world if we looked at it that way, from little healthy interchanges and interactions. It might be quite a different map than the ones that we're used to looking at. And so, this is the kind of stuff that Arthur thinks about a lot. And then why is the technology different? It's, I think, in part because they're coming from such a different angle. They weren't rooted in the way that it had been done. They were going, what is possible? And coming back from that vision and going, oh, here's what exists today. So how do I bridge from this stuff that people are super excited about and seems to be breaking through some ground to this world that I want? And they went, oh, it just meshes together like this. We've got existing technologies, we just paired them together, and here we go. Here's Holochain. Hi, Travis. Travis, we did a little presentation, and then we've all gone around the room sharing what brought us here. Would you like to share what brought you here?
You.
And beyond that?
Beyond that, Travis was one of the people coding on this project before it was called Holochain.
Sort of.
Sort of.
I tried. Is this?
It's a microphone. That's why it was thrown at you, Travis. Cool. So if you have any technical questions for discussion, Travis might be able to help you more than I can. Maybe. We have another person behind Jim that's been added in here. You can throw the microphone back to him. And so what brought you here, and what makes you interested in Holochain?
Yeah, definitely. I'm interested in blockchains. And
yes.
That's the reason why I'm just curious, what's up with Holochain. Yeah, and actually I'm lost, and Travis brought me here into the building.
Very good.
Any other questions? How much did you talk about the agent centricity? I mean, with the health data, that's
a little bit
very good in that regard.
What does it mean to be in an agent-centric world versus a... I keep trying to think of the right metaphor to tell people about the difference between the, we all agree on this one single truth out there versus an agent-centric view. And it feels something to me like the difference between when we had TV and there were 3 channels and we could only watch one of those 3 channels and they told us what the truth of the world was about. And then suddenly we got on YouTube and Twitter and all of a sudden we could all share our own perspective on the world. To me, the difference between the current model of what we have and what it looks like to shift to agent-centric is that. It's that kind of radical. It doesn't only have to be the one truth that's coming out of ABC. It gets to be the many truths that all of us are speaking to each other and sharing with each other. And they don't always have to be reconciled. I can have a different favorite color. I can have a different way of seeing a mountain than you can. And that's a beautiful thing that adds to our experiences together instead of trying to get to the one truth. And the one truth is useful for certain things. When we're talking about accounting, we want to agree about a truth. When we're talking about our experiences, we don't want to agree. We want to have different experiences. And so can we build these technologies that allow us to have that varied experience and can have the one truth on the few things that really need that level of agreement to them? So that's my on agent-centric.
And there's another great thing, and this is where Doc Seals is working on, the vendor relationship management, VRM, where as long as I own my own data, then I can also say, hey, now I'm in, I would like to buy a new car, and these are the parameters that I want this car to be. And then the vendors are coming to me and saying, here, I have this car or that fits into that perspective. And that is totally changing the relationship. By then you don't get the car commercials anymore. And only once you are decided, okay, now I need a new car, then that is happening.
And this is better for everybody, right? If you're selling cars, you want people who are interested in buying cars. You don't want to just like go out and blast everybody and not know if that's hitting anybody that's interested. You would love it if people go, I'm interested in buying a car. Please pitch your car to me. And so the idea of intent casting just seems like a win-win all around. So how do we develop the tools that'll really enable that? And my sense is, like, because we've been stuck in this architecture, we haven't been able to really innovate VRM because everybody's used to the old model. And so I'm hoping that as we shift, and Doc's excited about lots of platforms that could do VRM, but I'm hoping that Holochain is one of the spaces where we can make that intent casting clear. So businesses are able to do a better job because they're talking to the people who really want their products and services. Okay, can we break into discussion amongst ourselves and I can get away from the microphone and we can stop the live feedy thing?
If anybody's thirsty, there's drinks and snacks. You can grab one and get in small circles if you want in there. And enjoy.
Thank you for hosting us, Jim.